This is a very special episode of The Debrief. My guest today is Kim Pastore. Kim's husband, Jorge Pastore, was killed November 11th, 2023, while attempting to rescue hostages with the Austin SWAT Team. This was a case we covered previously and debriefed with the team. However, Kim has graciously offered to sit down and debrief the incident from her perspective, to walk us through what it was like, starting with the chief of police knocking on her door, all the way through the services, funerals, and everything that followed. This is an episode we've wanted to do for a long time on The Debrief, to look at the spouse's perspective in a line of duty death, and also look at the best practices that an agency, a team, and individual officers can engage in to make this process as easy as possible for the family members of the officer injured or killed in the line of duty. It's difficult to overemphasize how brave Kim is, sitting down to dig through the most traumatic event of her life with me. And on a personal level, I am unbelievably impressed by her bravery, her perseverance, and the way that she has coped with this event and turned this tragedy into something positive with the Jorge Pastore Foundation and with her efforts to try and improve line of duty deaths. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kim Pastore. My name is John Becker. For the past 4 decades, I've dedicated my life to protecting tactical operators. During this time, I've worked with many of the world's top law enforcement and military units. As a result, I've had the privilege of working with the amazing leaders who take teams into the world's most dangerous situations. The goal of this podcast is to share their stories in hopes of making us all better leaders, better thinkers, and better people. Welcome to The Debrief. Kim, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me, John.
I guess it's probably best to start with why we're doing this. I think, somebody who is watching this would think, my God, like, why is she reliving the worst day of her life? And why, John, are you having this conversation? And I think from my side of it, as a guy that is constantly dealing with people in trauma, I would say begun to realize, but have realized for quite a while that we don't get it right. Most of the time, we don't get it right. Departments don't handle it correctly. People don't handle it correctly. And I think a lot of times it's just because it's so novel. It's something that could happen, but nobody ever expected it to happen. And so I think part of the reason that I wanted to sit down with you is to really, you've been through something that hopefully nobody ever goes through again, but somebody's going to go through again. And you've seen the other side of this. And I really wanted get your lessons learned in the hopes that the next team that goes through what you went through learn from the good and the bad of the incident. So I think that's kind of my intent. Tell me why you wanted to do this.
The morning that this happened, I instinctively wanted things that I didn't necessarily get. And after learning about the process and really, they say you don't want to relive this trauma, but what you don't know is that we relive it all day, every day, and those constant loops of what happened. And I find myself stuck on parts of the loops where those are the moments that we maybe could have done a little better. And I think from a human perspective, sometimes that emotional intelligence maybe isn't there. And because you're dealing with police officers, they come from a place of protecting people. And then the protection becomes kind of leaving things out or doing what they might think is best, because it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of someone when you haven't experienced the same thing. And the same as I couldn't have understood what it was going to feel like or be like. So my goal with you and you giving me this opportunity is that we can hopefully provide the people that have to make these notifications. And look, nobody wants to do that. It's not the most fun job at a department, but that those people that do that, like any other position or any other task, that the more information you have on how to do it the best that you can hopefully avoid adding additional trauma to the worst day of someone's life. And it's not intentional, but it's the same thing. Without the tools to do it the best that you can, how can you expect anybody to do that? So I think that I want to do it in the hopes that if one department makes a small change, that, and we all want to say, let's hope it never happens again, but hope's not a plan, right? Unfortunately, it's going to happen. And when it does, that the people that go to make this notification have the best shot of doing it the best that they can, so that there's not a more trauma added to an already very traumatic experience.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell you that as a guy who sits down with people and talks about the worst day of their life on kind of both sides of the event, nobody ever gets it right. I don't think there's a right answer. I think there are a lot of wrong answers. And I think that sometimes what we do intuitively, what our instincts are as to how to handle these kinds of situations aren't the right answer. And so, like, from my perspective, I'm looking at this conversation the way I look at any other debrief. Like, the point here is not to second guess anything that was done. It's not to look back and go, oh man, your agency didn't get this right, or they should have done this, or they should have done that. It's like, all right, you've been through this traumatic event. What could have made it better?
Mm.
Right? Where could we avoid causing injury that was unintentionally caused? Where could we improve future actions? And it's not, this was a traumatic event for everybody that was involved. George was obviously a ridiculously popular guy. The team adored him. Everybody that's involved is traumatized here.
Mhm.
And so I just want to, from the beginning, make clear that that's not the intent here, is not to second guess, not to, criticize, but to go, okay, from your perspective, what happened? What did you want? What did you get? Where was there opportunity that next time we can do?
Absolutely. And I will say that I did, in preparation for our conversation, just sometimes you just need, I don't want to call it validation, but maybe because you don't have a gauge for, there's times when I've often thought, did I act appropriately? Did what I want, was that appropriate? And so I did speak with people who, this is what they do. They either do line of duty death notifications across their state, or they are trauma therapists or peer support, something along those lines. So there was a lot of things that I intuitively felt that did align with best practices or experiences that they've had where they saw the best outcome, if that's a way to put it, or not. I mean, best outcomes. So I think it's more just about best practices as it relates to how humans handle trauma. And sometimes just giving somebody a way to go, okay, you might have the spouse that freaks out and screams, and then one that completely shuts down. And then where do we go from that? And what's the fallout? And how can we appropriately respond to maybe the top three typical responses for this? And as officers' wives, we all are kind of a different breed anyway. And so really kind of fine tuning what that looks like and what we think some of those common responses would be, and how to apply what we do to that, right?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, what do I think is best for this person that I've never met in my life, you know?
Yeah, and I think, it's not a bad idea to preface, like, just kind of my feeling, having talked to you and prepared for this conversation. You are an abnormal badass. Like, your ability, nobody wants to look at their trauma, right? This was 14, 15 months ago. Right, this is not 10 years ago, right? We're not far from the anniversary of it. And, like, your willingness in our conversations to lean into this for the good of the next wife or the department, is just exemplary. Like, I cannot stress enough to people that are listening, um, if you don't seem as emotional as people would expect you to be about some of this stuff, it's not because it isn't emotional. It's because you have managed to fight through this thing in a way that honestly astounds me every time we talk.
Thank you. It's not easy.
Nope.
My clavicles are tingling right now. My neck's tight. The heart pounds, and it's not being nervous to speak to you. It's just, I do find though, that talking about it, as horrible as it is sometimes, it does release that energy. I think it's just a buildup of that trauma that stores in the body. And I learn about it. I've been trying desperately to understand grief. It's an insane human condition that is very hard to understand why it's so painful and why it lasts so long. And we can talk about different things in our lives and fight or flight. And we all kind of have a good understanding of why we have those. We used to be chased by tigers, all the things that maybe we've evolved out of, but still have as a human condition. But grief is, and you just have to flip it. I just try to flip it and go to gratitude. And George has put me in a beautiful community of people that have been so supportive. And I just try to go to the positive. And if I'm going to make the choice to move forward, how can I do that in the best possible way and to help others, which is what he spent his life doing. And so it's a tribute to him and it's him living through me. And I just hope if we can just help one other person or wife or department, even for the department, to people that notify, my heart goes out to them too. I can't imagine what it must have felt like. And just watching the chief take that deep breath before she had to say the words that came out of her mouth, I was just like, my heart broke for her. And so even if I can just help anybody, what else? It makes everything that happened to George worthwhile, and it makes his sacrifice mean something. And so that's really my motivation.
Well, and it's an extension of your work with the foundation, right? Like, you created the Jorge Pastore Foundation to help guys train and make them better and make them safer. And this is one more step in that direction.
Absolutely.
Why don't let's walk through it. November 11th, 2025. How does your day start?
Well, I didn't know the date. I know a lot of people, it's actually a beautiful day, 11/11, and if how you look at it, people make wishes on that day, and I've tried to look at it that way, but for me, it was a Saturday morning. Lucky for me, George worked 2 to 12 on patrol Friday night, and so, very unusual for him to get off at a decent time. I think he got off around 12:30, said he was on his way. So 1:00 in the morning is early for us because he works nights. And so I thought, well, good, I'm going to wait up. And so I'm so grateful that I got to see him. We got to chat. He got in bed. We talked for a couple minutes and the call came out shortly after, I think like 3:30ish, something like that. So he always, he gets up. He never complains about a call. I watched him like out of the corner of my eye because his stuff was laying on the foot of the bed. He got dressed. Came over, kiss, 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 kissed here. It kind of missed. I asked him for a better one. He gave me a kiss. He said, love you, see you in a bit. He always said, see you in a bit. He never said goodbye. It was his thing. He just always said, see you in a bit. He sets off. And I remember thinking, well, I leave for work at 9, so I probably won't see him. SWAT calls, as you know, typically take forever. And so I thought I wouldn't see him before he got back, went back to sleep. And it wasn't shortly, I mean, it was very quickly thereafter that I heard a loud knock on the door, and I actually thought it might have been an Amazon delivery, the kind that you order the day and they come between 4 and 8 in the morning. I'm like, but they don't typically knock. And then I heard it get louder. And I still didn't think it could be that. And I heard the dogs barking. So I thought maybe it was a neighbor trying to, your brain you wake up, your brain tries to figure it out. I walk to the door and we have a window to the right of our door. And I just looked out the window, saw 2 lines of officers, the chief, regular patrol officers dressed in there and a couple SWAT guys. And they were just in 2 lines. And my knees got weak and my heart started to pound. And I sort of shut the door. And I just remember saying, no, there's no way. And I thought maybe he was just in a car accident, but why are there so many people here? And it's amazing how many thoughts you can have in such a short amount of time. And we talked about this, and it always would have been his support officer that would have been there. to tell me something happened with George and take me to George. That was kind of, we talked about it. And so I just didn't understand why there were so many people. And I could just see on their faces like something was wrong, obviously. And then the chief, I could see her lip was just quivering a little bit. And she said, Kim, I'm so sorry. George was shot and killed. I'm sorry. The SWAT a hostage rescue call this morning. And I'm like, this is impossible. He just left. And I don't remember much. I just remember everybody coming into my house, and I think I went to put better clothes on. And I think I immediately asked, and I've had to ask people like what happened. There's so much I don't remember, and I try to get people to help me to remember it because your brain just like loops and loops and loops. And you sort of fill in gaps. And I just remember thinking, there's so many people here. Why is there so many people here? And naturally, as anyone would, I wanted to be taken to George. I wanted to go to George. And it was almost as if no one anticipated that would be something I wanted, which is so strange to me because what else would I want? And what else would anybody want? And then there's a lot of unanswered questions. What happened? How did this happen? And you think all this training, I never worried about him on SWAT. Like how in the world could something like this happen? And then of course, was anybody else hurt or killed? And then I instantly thought, oh my God, if George had to come home and tell me one of the guys was killed. And so then my heart broke and shattered a million times more thinking of all the guys that were there. And so I just said, can you please take me to George? And I kept asking by name for his support officer. And as it turned out, they said that that I couldn't go to the hospital, that I couldn't see him. They didn't want me to see him. So the victim services person who I'm still in touch with regularly, she was amazing. And she called the hospital and they said, the ME said, no, she can't see him. Like, we're so sorry, Kim. They're saying no. Which I just didn't understand. And I'm like, just as pinky, like anything, because they said because of the trauma that I couldn't see him. And I'm like, well, surely his finger, his toe, anything. I could see anything. And the answer just kept being no. And then they told me that his support officer and his best friend on patrol was at the hospital. So I thought, well, at least if he's with him, it's hard not to be upset about the fact that I wish I would have just gone, but you're so numb. Not numb, you're just so, it's the strangest feeling. And so they told me I couldn't go. So the type of person that I am, all right, what's the next step? What do we have to do? I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 people were in my home. Everyone's just kind of looking at you. I sort of felt like, I think I even said, should I make coffee? Does anybody need water? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do here. All I want is to be with George. I didn't care what he looked like. I wouldn't have cared. Like about blood, like none of it. Obviously, if he was shot, I have a good idea of what he may have looked like. I just wanted to be in his presence. And, there was some talk of them doing CPR on the way to the hospital. So then you're wondering, did he suffer? Did he know I wasn't there? A lot goes through your mind. And so I think when we kind of just resolved ourselves to the fact that we weren't going to get to go to the hospital, they said Felix was with him. And Felix was asking where I was. I was asking, I didn't mean to really say his name, but he's asking where I was. And we're going back and forth. And it felt like an eternity, John. It felt like people were in my house for hours. And then they said, do you have a friend that we can call or go get? So 2 of the guys, I think, went to try to get one of my friends who lived close by. And then we called my other friend who then drove to my house, and it felt like it took an hour, and people are still in the house. I think at some point that she finally had to leave to do her news conference and ask if it was okay to release his name. And then who else do we call? And the family. And it's just like, um, it's just too much. It's just too much. So already right off the bat, all I want is to be with him. I don't care. Release his name. Tell who you want. I need to be with him right now. And so that couldn't happen. And so more people just kept coming to the house. And now a wonderful sergeant with the department brought his 3 support. He had 2. You assigned 2, but brought 3 of his guys he had gone through academy with that I personally knew. And looking back, and this might sound strange, but I didn't know anybody in that group of people. And, sometimes you just need someone to give you a hug. And there wasn't a hug. There wasn't anybody who knew me. And they all looked like deer in headlights because they were traumatized themselves. So they send people, all of which knew George, loved George. If you knew him, you loved him. It was just the way it went. And now they're in my home, which looking back, I think now they're seeing where George lives and seeing the reality of his real life and his wife and our love and our pictures and my note to him, don't forget your radio. I love you. And his coffee ready to go and all the things that are our home and our wedding photos and all of those things. And I have to imagine for them, that was probably a shocking, I don't know. I can only imagine.
That's gotta be. It's gotta be
what
traumatic,
brings
right?
the human. And then you get in there and it's like, this is real.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're having to confront face to face with the trauma that's left behind, right? They're seeing the effect it has on you.
And how do you not think of your own wife?
Oh, yeah.
And you're still in shock as to what happened. I mean, one of the guys still had blood on him, from helping one of the other officers that was shot. So it's like, this is too much. It's already too much what they do, their everyday life. This is a reality. This is almost like crossing the line trauma for them, right? Because the only way to cope with what you do all day, every day as an officer is to compartmentalize and push it down. And now
You're not pushing it down.
And so I don't know how much further you want me to go in the day. And then the day just fills up and there's more people and more questions. And all I'm needing and all my insides and heart are screaming for is to be with George. And I never got that. I never got that chance.
And is that because they're trying to protect you? Is that because, there's a criminal investigation? Like, what do you think is underlying that inability?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think and we all have spoken about it since then. And I think because police officers tend to be so black and white, they thought I was going to go in, pull off a sheet, look at everything. And now I think they understand I just needed to be in his presence, in his energy, even if it just meant to hold his pinky, right? To see, I said, you can show me any part of his body and I will know that it's him. Because you have to remember another officer has been brought to the hospital as well and undergoing surgery. So in your head, you're like, maybe they're wrong. You don't just go, okay. I'm like, I just kept waiting, like in my head, I'm like, they're going to say, no, I'm so sorry, but we were wrong. They revived him from CPR. We're going to take you now. Because there's just no way. This isn't supposed to happen. It isn't, especially on a SWAT call, right?
Yeah.
So you just have this weird, strange hope that they're gonna. And I would say I'm not even mad if you you messed up and you have to turn this around and tell me he's okay. So I do think there is a level of protection for sure, and them not wanting me to see it, and them only knowing how they think they would feel if their wife saw them and what they might want. Um, and so once they realized it wasn't that I wanted to see his injuries, I just needed to be in his presence, right? Whether it be for closure or to see, because your brain can't believe it.
Yeah.
Someone's just telling you something. It could be a lie, right? We don't even believe the news. We don't believe things we see on TV. It could be, so I think that's where a lot of the trauma takes place. And then those people then represent, they're connected to that trauma.
Right.
And you don't want to be connected to someone's trauma, especially as you go through the week and the funeral arrangements and all the things that happen and people that worked with them. And now we're all connected through trauma. And in our case, it's helped because we're all healing together. But that day, I would say, as we get into this and what is the biggest turning point and the biggest thing that I would change, it would be if the spouse wants to go to the hospital, you take the spouse to the hospital. And most of the trauma people and therapists and people that I've talked to are like, absolutely, they need to go. But I was told that once the ME has the body, it's the ME's decision, and it's their body. Texas law says that the ME makes those decisions. So again, I don't know. I think even just to have gone to the hospital, and then some people say that would have been traumatic, and I'm like, well, the absolute worst thing happened. It's hard to say in hindsight, but I think for myself, and now that people who know me, that would have been something that I still want and still sort of haunts me to this day. But I do think there was a level of wanting to protect me there, and no malicious intent at all, and everybody's heart was in the right place for sure. It was a big critical it was a major critical incident for Austin, for that department, for SWAT. He was on honor guard, and honor guard's the one who kind of takes care of that. A lot of people knew him, so it was incredibly traumatic for everybody.
Well, and you can see, I can see, I would have a desire to protect you. He died in a traumatic way,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not going to be pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have a desire to let's not make that her last memory. Let's try to prevent her from seeing that, because that will be better for her.
Yes.
Instinctively, that's what you would do, but you don't stop to think about the fact that, there is a part of us that just needs to know it's real.
Needs to know it's real, and your brain fills in gaps. So when you say there's so much trauma, and then you have 10 people identify a body that they think something's traumatic, right? Like, that actually is worse. Now what I'm imagining is there's nothing left of him to see.
Right.
Right? And so when you allow someone's brain to fill in gaps, the unknown becomes worse.
Yeah, it's the horror movie,
Mhm.
right? It's the scary music in the dark hallway, and obviously this is all we know. It's terrible, but not having a tangible memory of it or having an opportunity to see it, your brain starts to run wild with it. What are they hiding from me?
Right. And exactly. That, and also they're basing their decision on what they have seen or know to be.
Yeah.
When I wouldn't want to see that. And if they told me not to look here, just to have held his hand and be able to say something to him, and everybody has a different idea about death. And I've had the opportunity to be with my father, and people when they take their last breath, and there's a beauty to that too. And so to think about where he was and who he was with, and we don't know what that is, and it felt like a betrayal, like I wasn't with him in his worst moment. And that was a really tough pill for me to swallow. Because you always imagine being with your loved one, or I don't know, or at their bedside, or holding their hand, or I don't know. I think it's just the way you hope. But in their line of work, obviously this can happen, and just try not to really think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if there is, it's hard to find a silver lining to this cloud, right? But if there is a silver lining, I think it is that it was very quick, right? I mean, he
Yes.
was shot in the head. Like,
Thank God.
it was very quick.
Thank
He
God.
probably never knew that it happened, right?
Thank
Which
God.
is, I guess, the tiny little bit of silver tinge on a
For sure.
black cloud,
It
right?
took a minute to get that information though,
Yeah,
you know, because honestly, they don't know, and in any kind of situation like that, they can't answer a bunch of questions they don't really have answers to. And when you're talking about an investigation and a scene of that nature, when so much happened, um, and so that makes it harder too, because you don't know, are they just keeping things from me or do they really not know? And now understanding it, typically, if they say they don't know, they really don't. Or they have an idea, but they don't know it to be true yet. And they're trying to prevent people from, spreading wrong information.
yeah. The last thing you want to do is tell,
Right.
a woman whose husband was just killed
The wrong thing.
that something that didn't happen did.
Right. Right.
So it is probably you're having to very carefully vet information and make sure, everything we're saying is truthful, but that takes time. And from your perspective, you want to know everything right now because this just happened.
Right. Right. Because it's your brain. It's nothing else. Your brain's just trying to make sense of things. Um, because what else do you do?
Yeah.
What else do you do?
Well, you're trying to make sense, and I mean your entire world has changed in a split second. And so your brain has to be looking to anchor it in something, right? It's like what still is real.
Right.
So there is, I can see where you're going to want the information even if it's bad information.
I mean, even to this day, I still can't believe it.
Yeah.
I still can't believe it. It's like I'm hovering above myself. Um, but strangely and oddly enough, you're 100% right about, him going instantly, um, and not feeling any pain. And for him, I mean, if he had to pick away all of you guys,
This would have been it.
this would have been it. Aside from
Protecting his
not,
teammates on a hostage rescue.
yep, exactly. If he could have had it his way, I'm sure he would have been able to save the hostages, um, and have his teammate not get shot at all. But I think we've talked about, and as you know, he had a tattoo across his chest above his heart that said, "Protect my brothers." Everyone goes home. So it's like, of course, George went out with a bang and got to get that's what he lived for, and he
And
wouldn't
it's
change a
exactly what he
thing.
did.
Mhm.
I mean, it's exactly what he did. We debriefed this case, you know, weeks ago, and sitting with the team and talking with the team and going through it. It's exactly what he did. So it's you know maybe
And
a little too on the nose, but
I know, and I know who I married. I know who he was. It would never be a question in my mind. As a matter of fact, I was just wanting to make sure. It's just the reconciliation of all the training, and then this happened anyway. But the beautiful thing in talking with the guys is like, but it's all the training that gave him the confidence to run in there and do what he did.
yeah,
Without the training, he would have been, in what world would your brain allow you to run into a situation like that? And so it was all because of the training and the trust they have in one another, even in the stack, not having to turn back and go, okay, who's here? Do you guys got me? They got you. It doesn't matter who's in the stack. You're good to go, and that's where the training comes in. And training was so incredibly important to him. And so um, I'm glad I figured that out sooner than later, because that was a tough pill to swallow at first, was like all this training, all this time away to train,
yeah.
and look at what happened. But they wouldn't have been able to do, and they executed that, as far as I know and what I know about it and what I've seen and heard, almost flawlessly.
They did the right thing.
They did.
It's just unfortunately in some of these situations you don't have total control,
Right.
right? And that is the ugly truth that I think probably is rationalized away to allow you to work. and to allow families to deal with this is that most of the time it's totally fine,
Most of the time,
but not always.
but not always.
And
Mhm.
and unfortunately, you're on the receiving end of not always,
Mhm.
right? So you've got these people in your house where, obviously your friends have come over now. Um, the chief and to her credit, that would have been a really easy knock on the door to delegate to somebody else. I will give her because she was an interim chief, if I
Yes,
remember
she
correctly.
is. I cannot say enough about her. She's been by my side every step of the way, every memorial, every award, every even for the Humble Warrior Games. She dedicated herself that entire weekend to us, set up with us all day at my house at 9:30 at night Saturday, helping me put the teams together for the obstacle course. Next day there setting up. She has literally been at every single thing and by my side through all of this. Checks in. She is something special, a special human being, and I'm so grateful for that. She definitely top notch.
Yeah,
Great human being. Can't say enough about her.
yeah. That would have been a really easy knock on the
For
door
sure.
to be too busy to make. So I'll give her full credit.
Full credit.
Um, what's the next significant event that happens?
So as people leave, they start to go over what's going to happen, and of course now we have to make some calls, right? We have to notify his family. I have to notify my boys, my friends. My brain just starts going crazy. I'm like, oh my God, we owned a karate school together in Florida. And so thinking, oh my gosh, the karate kids. And, with each thought of telling who I have to tell, my heart is just like, it's just like, you know, oh my gosh. And so, everybody's like, well, who can I call? And this is the type of news that people need to hear from you. I can't just, there's certain people I can say, there was like this top tier. If I can call these 5 people, then I can get them to notify what comes after that. And, then just thinking of all his firefighter, he was a firefighter forever. Our whole family of friends in Florida, the karate students, and my mind is just wow, and our boys. And so the victim services lady kind of kicks everybody out, and I said, I have to make some calls. I got to make some tough calls. I got to just sit down. I need to take a deep breath, and I've got to start to make some calls. And so we did that. I barely remember. I've had to ask those people, like, where were you when I told you what happened? And even just to hear their stories, ooh, is really hard because so I got mine, but all these people have to hear it for the first time. And it's truly unbelievable. This isn't the news anybody would have ever expected. And then, of course, the word starts to travel very quickly. And APD was amazing about helping me get his family notified. And there were a lot of challenges with that. They were spread out, hard to find in Florida. So none of our families here. So you're talking about, asking for their local police departments to go to the house. It's a lot of coordination and a lot of challenges to get everybody notified. And as time goes on, the last thing you want is for people to find out through social media or the wrong way or get the wrong news. So it felt very rushed. And again, I'm still reeling from the knock on the door. And so everything that's added on top of it, your brain's not catching up. Your brain doesn't catch up, and somehow you fall into whatever your default is. So if you are a organizer, problem solver, get 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 shit done kind of person, that's what you're going to do. Like, what is the next thing? Um, I was always just moments away from collapsing and not being able to do anything, paralyzed, and it was two extremes, or just keep going, get things done. And then all of a sudden your house starts to fill with more people, and then people are flying in. And the next thing for me was that I was hopefully going to get to at least see him somehow when they moved him the next day, Sunday, from the medical examiner's office to the funeral home. Um, Somehow we chose a funeral home. There was one that they use for officers. And so they do try to make things as easy as possible. But in that process, there are so many decisions to make very quickly, I guess different than a normal maybe death notification because of the publicity of this, because now it's a crime scene. Now you have the FBI come in, all these things. All the guys are on do not discuss orders. Some are getting their weapons taken away. They're sitting through there's a lot simultaneously happening, time sensitive. And so it feels very rushed, where you feel like you need just a minute and there's no minutes. You just got to keep going. And so now, well, my focus is going to be on Sunday getting to see George, because I was still back there, right? That need of mine didn't get fulfilled. Okay, well, someone else is with him. Someone's coming to see me, and tomorrow I'll get to see George. And so everything for me was that, which that also didn't really happen. So now we've got everybody flying in Saturday, which I didn't know that when you tell people, that's what they do. Because I didn't say, please fly to me, right? So now people from my Florida life are coming into my Texas life, and we've only been in Texas now 4 or 5 years at this point. So it's very disorienting. And you've got officers coming and people just coming to the house, and what do you need? What do you need? They start setting up meal trains and the flowers and the food and and it's a lot. And
all of it is good intentioned.
yes.
And all of it is trying to help you, and all of it is overwhelming you.
100%. It's so overwhelming. And you hear conversations happening, and it's like, wait, my aunt's coming she's driving. And you want to say, like, no, tell her not to, we don't even know what's happening, right? You want to say, it's like you hear these voices in your head. It's almost like you're in a dream state. And it's just too much. So all I could ever do, and anybody who walked in that might have more information about George, that was what I was hyper focused on. And, you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't sleep, you can't do any of, you just hyper focused on how do I get to see George and what really happened. Because you have to remember, at that point, I don't really know. I don't know if he suffered. I don't know who was with him. I don't know. It takes time to figure all that out, even for the guys who are on scene. You're taking time to look at body camera footage. You're talking about it, being interviewed, all of those things. So it's almost hard to talk about now in hindsight, and trying to truly remember in those moments how disorienting it really, really was.
Yeah.
Because now I know the information that I didn't know then. But all I wanted was George, and I wanted him to walk through the door. And I remember saying, like, I don't even care if this is a joke. If he just walks in, I won't be mad at anyone, I promise.
Yeah. It's the bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like, they talk about the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief: the denial, acceptance, bargaining, depression, or
like,
denial,
I'll do anything.
bargaining, acceptance, depression, and acceptance. Yeah, you're in the bargaining portion of the program.
Just like, okay, even if they're wrong, it's okay. If everybody's wrong, just he's going to come through the door. This can't really be happening. And so, who do you lean on when you're spiraling? Your person, and your person's not there.
Yeah.
And so I would just always think, like, what would he tell me, And so most of the hardest moments I got through were just him tell what I know he would say to me. And he always used to say, "You're the strongest person I know." And whew, like, well, this one, I don't know.
Definitely one of the strongest people I know, Kim.
Whew,
I think he was right in that regard.
Golly, I, and then you think, like, I was sleeping when he took his last breath. In our bed. How could this be? So there's a lot of guilt, but also I know, like I said, I know who I married, and I was so grateful that nobody else was killed, which was truly a miracle. You've debriefed it, you know what happened, and so anyway, so we get to Sunday. So now my house stayed full till I left 8 days later to go to Florida to do some. We did a couple services in Florida, so. Of course, I don't sleep that night. House is full of people. And I'm glad everybody's there. But the hostess in me, it's hard not to be a hostess. And everyone's in your stuff, going through you're getting your blankets and your blow up mattresses and your pots and pans and pulling out food and, taking over your space. And again, all the right intentions. But being the empath that I am, everybody that walks in your house for the first time walks up to you. So I'm getting each person's initial
Yeah.
pain of seeing me every single time over and over and over. And each person elicits a new, your friend from 4th grade who you've been through everything with, and you're just like, okay, this is a different level. Friends who's like, Kim, I've never even seen you cry. I don't know what to do. And your love was everything. And we know how much you loved him and how much you loved, and so every single person elicits a new stab to the heart, and it's not intentional. And then what are you going to complain that you have so many good friends, right? And a beautiful social circle of people that love you and care about you and appreciated your love and loved George. And
Well, we're going to talk about some of the contradictions
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
that you
yeah.
and I have talked about, right? Like there are a million contradictions in play here that I think we'll kind of dig into once we get through the timeline, because it is, it's
Am
like
I
you
allowed
said,
to cuss?
all you want.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
knock
Well,
yourself out.
because it's a level of mind fuckery that is inexplainable. But it is it is fuckery at its peak, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the example you gave, right? Everybody's coming up to you, they're expressing their sorrow and, trying to be helpful, and in the process, tearing your guts out.
Hmm.
And you don't want them to leave you alone, but you kinda need to be alone.
Right. There was no moment, um, and I refer back to that hug. And I think if everyone can just think like how you let down, what happens, right? Your daughter, your wife, anything. It's like, oh, this day is terrible. And you're like, come here. What happens when you just put your arms around someone? And that's when you can. So it's hard when you have all these people, none of which you know. And it took hours before I finally had people that I could just like, holy shit, this happened.
Yeah,
Like this sucks so bad.
because having all these people that you don't know in your house, you are gonna feel the need to put up a front,
Right.
right? You're gonna try to be a good host, or, try not to come unraveled and turn into a crumbled heap and all of those things, and in the process, you're also not allowed to turn into a crumbled heap.
Because they have to ask questions. Even just, is it okay if we really, and you have to ask, you have to ask those questions. Who can we call? They don't know. So then I have to go, I don't even know who you can call. Like, okay, call her, right? And then where can we go? And then it's a friend that has a code to her gate. What's the code to the gate? Like, what? I don't even know how I knew it, And
Yeah.
so, but they have to ask those questions in order to help you. It's weird. Again, it's just,
Is there anything, and we'll talk a little bit about lessons learned, but just while we're in this topic, what would have made it better?
that's easy. Every officer in every department should have a, a death plan, literally. As horrible as that sounds, they have death binders now. People like plan these things out. It's the one thing that we know can happen, regardless of where you are in your life. And this plan says, I, officer whoever, want, first of all, it should never be more than 3 people that do any kind of a notification. 3 people max. And you're talking about a chief, assistant chief, someone in that higher level. They're a support officer that is designated by the officer, because typically that's going to be someone that also knows your spouse.
Yeah.
And you've had a conversation with them about how your spouse should be dealt with. As a matter of fact, when his support officer came into the house, when he finally got there, which was well over an hour and a half later, he knew what his one job was. And because they took him to the hospital, he thought I was on my way. I thought he was on his way. There was a little bit of miscommunication there. He walked in and said, George said, if this ever happened, do not bullshit Kim. Like, right? So just that, him knowing me, it would have maybe given the notification team an idea of, okay, this is someone who wants things, don't sugarcoat. Let's have a plan. She's going to take action. Or someone who maybe is very fragile. There's 2 toddlers in the house.
Yeah.
That support officer kind of knows what type of a person you're. There are some people that said I would never want to go to the hospital, and the other half say I would have gone to the hospital. I would have plowed through people to get to the hospital. So the one thing I've learned is, although I tend to be very different. I've always been different in my group of friends. There are still, you're never alone. There's always someone else who thinks like you.
Sure.
There's no one human that thinks different than everybody else. So that would have made it better. And then to have the third person would have been a peer support, victim service, a chaplain, someone like that.
Someone who's trained in dealing with the situation.
Yes.
So you have the person who's going to give the notification.
Right.
You have a friend. You have basically the person who's going to give the notification, the person who's going to give the hug, and the person who's going to know what the hell to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And it's quick. You rip off the Band-Aid. This happened. These are the next steps. And because typically the chief is going to have to leave.
Yeah,
They're going to have to get in and get out. So
it's the worst day of her career.
Right. Absolutely. So they're going to have to get in. So you're left with 2 until they get your person there. And it wouldn't be a bad idea on this emergency or sheet, whatever you want to call it, for the wife then to designate who to contact.
Yeah.
Now you're not asking the spouse, I'm fumbling around on my phone trying to find my friend's number. I can then tell my friend, you're my person if this happens.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Right? And so I think you have to be able to have the conversation, though. And you need to have the conversation. And, if we ever do more based on this, there's also what George put in place for me is amazing in terms of all the things that they're offered, benefits and accidental and life insurance and all those things that they have. I don't think people are talking about these things.
No.
Because you want to hope it never happens.
Yeah.
And chances are it won't.
Yeah. Having done estate planning with my own wife and not in a job where this is a possibility, you don't want to have that conversation.
And what do you want?
Yeah.
There was even, you talk about selecting pallbearers, and George being on the honor guard, he's done so many funerals. And so they wanted to get it right. George has guarded caskets. He's sat outside of homes. He's transported. He's dressed officers. He's done it all, and he took it very seriously. It was incredibly important to him. And so there was that pressure on them to get all this right. And they did a beautiful job, and his service was incredible. They had to move the venue, I think, a couple of times because of the amount of people that attended. There was a lot of stress. It was a very stressful, but had some of that been laid out on an open casket, like, do you even want, who would you want if you could as your pallbearers? They were having to, there's a lot of stuff that, and I think when you talk about those things, you already have released some of the preemptive trauma that exists in thinking about it. You have a plan.
Right.
It's like any other aspect of the job they do. You want a plan. It's just a tough topic.
When you also, I was, one of my dearest friends died a year and a half ago, and I acted as this family representative. So I was the one that took all the phone calls. I was the one that notified the relatives. I was the one that was dealing, they called the immediate family, but the aunt whatever who, no longer talks to the family, like that was my problem. And the thing that I saw is anything that somebody else doesn't deal with, some member of the family does. And in the case of you and George, like that means that you're going to make all those phone calls. You're going to make all those decisions. Like it's all going to be your problem. And anything that is pre-decided is not your problem and lets you just continue to move through the 8,000 other things that are confronting you.
I've heard from officers who were support officers. And, there's a lot of things to consider. There are times when, depending upon the time of the day, support officers don't answer their phone. Their phone's on Do Not Disturb because they just got off shift and they're sleeping.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's going to play out perfectly by any stretch. So, in every situation, and nobody knows this better than you, is completely different. And the timeliness of the notification is very different at 4 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, when you probably can't even get to the spouse's house before she's going to find out from somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? So there are very different situations. I do think, though, across the board, there's never a situation where more than 3 people need to do a notification. And I do think that there's never going to be a time where having a little bit of a plan that's easily accessible by the notification team. So that's the other thing. If it's some paper in a notebook in someone's office somewhere and it's not in a database or easily accessible, you get a lot of people calling people they know. Do you know where the wife lives? Do you know who I'm supposed to call? Do his parents even live here? And now they're having to figure all this out in the moment. And that's a cluster, right? In and of itself. So if there's something, you pull it up, spouse is, they live at this address, officer is this. And I don't know that that doesn't exist. But if I had to guess universally what would be better for any department anywhere, it would be having that in place. You do that at the academy, and then you do it every 3 to 6 months. And I think a lot of departments do have you update those things. I just don't know if it's a piece of paper and how do they access it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people made phone calls and asked officers questions that I was like, why is this department asking these questions? Like, why are they trying to figure out where I live? Like, how, I would think you just pull it up and there it is, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even at my job, I don't know. It would take them a minute to figure out, because I think it's in the personnel, files in our corporate office somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, you're going to have to hunt that information, and having it readily accessible reduces the time and also creates an opportunity to more quickly make decisions and not have to go and chase the information or, God forbid, ask the spouse
Right.
8,000 questions, because they're going to have to ask you 8,000 questions.
And even if there's a guide for how do you talk to your support officer, like your support officer should know these 10 things. Do they know your wife? Have they been to your home? Do you have children, dogs, whatever that need to be cared for if they take your wife to the hospital? Would she, I don't know, just I was lucky enough to know his support officer very well, and we knew each other very well. But I'd like to think that every officer has someone close enough to them that at least has met their wife. And it's a whole different story about talking about private lives and officers talking about that. But I do think that would be helpful if it was easily accessible information where you're removing decision-making and fact-finding missions out of an equation of an already chaotic, stressful situation.
Yeah. So, okay, so we're through Sunday.
Well, we're through Saturday. So Sunday is we're all going to meet. We're all going to go to the Emmy. They do a procession just like they do for a funeral. It's that big of a deal,
Right.
moving him from the Emmy to the funeral home. So there's a line of cars. There's a ton of people, and I'm in. I believe it was George's SUV with his support officer and a couple of our closest friends and his best friend in the back, and they're transporting him, and I can see where they are. Again, Kim, what do you need? Can I be in the car with George? No. If I had my way, I would have crawled I would have laid with him. That's really, truly what I wanted. So we follow and go to the funeral home, and I've learned to try to ask questions about what I can expect, because after there's a lot of things that happen where you just don't even know what to expect, and so we sort of lined up at the entrance of the funeral home, and I don't know, it felt like 30 of the SWAT guys were there, dressed, saluting as he is moved through, and I again, my heart was just broken. You could just see in their eyes, like, just shock, and disbelief. And, of course, I'm crying, and I don't even remember being able to stand up. And I looked at my friend and I said, can I go over and hug them? And they were like, no, don't do that. So again, here's another thing that I instinctively wanted to do, because I just felt like it was like I could just hug them and say, like, we're in this together. Like, I don't know if they were blaming themselves. I know George would have. And I wanted to, if I could take any of it away by please don't worry about me, right? Like, I'm okay with, I trust you. I knew about probably survivor's guilt and just the mentality of, I'm sure they've run through it a million times and it could have been me. I don't know. I can't say what they were feeling, but I could tell by how they looked that they were heartbroken, you know? This is their worst nightmare. And I didn't know they were all going to be there. I just thought I was going to have my husband brought in, you know, and everything's so big in these situations. There's so many people and it's so big and there's police escorts and police everywhere and it's a lot. Even my friends were just like, holy shit, like what's going on? I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah,
and-
because it's not just at this point, it's not just your husband,
right.
right?
It's barely my husband. Yeah.
It's a symbol,
Right.
right? George he's a hero, and he's given his life for other people, and so we're going to honor him, but that honor is going to have a price for the family.
Right. Right. Exactly. And he deserved to be honored and I would never have taken that away from them. And I knew, I guess instinctively, I knew that it mattered. But line of duty death is so much more than just dying doing your job.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I was like, what in the world? And George and I were so private. We weren't really on social media. We just liked our alone time. He was very humble. And it was just so different than just the way we lived our lives. And it was so big and so many moving parts and so much going on and just thick with emotion.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the air was so thick. And then you still have that performative. I had to stand up. I had to walk in, had to sign papers. I had to answer questions. I had to, you know, and everyone's around and they're touching you and is this okay? Are you okay? You know. And again, woe is me for having, you know, so many great people that were trying to help, right? And then
I
you
think
know,
that's
if your
a very
children,
reasonable feeling.
you know, you're trying to, and then you think, oh my gosh, you know, I don't want my boys. I don't know what it would be like to see your mom, you know. So then I'm trying to be strong for them. And I don't want the SWAT guys to feel worse to see me like this. And, you know, never from the moment they knocked on my door, I still haven't had a moment just to be by myself and think like, what in the hell is going on? And so it just keeps piling on top, just piles on top, piles on top, piles on top. And you somehow, I understand now that like somehow you have this the fight or flight is amazing. That you can just walk and function and talk and think. And I don't know how, I don't even know how it works, but it does. And so um, we get through that. And I think they continue to tell me that it's not a good idea for me to see him and to please wait until they have him dressed and ready. And that would be a better time. I didn't know at that point that by law, I'm the only person that had a right to see him once he got to the funeral home. The Emmy is a different story. There is a law in Texas that the Emmy, so again, a little bit feeling guilty. My son said that I went in and put my hand on his knee when they moved by, and I don't remember that. But the next would have been Wednesday at 3:00 to be able to see him once they had dressed him and, you know, made him look presentable. So now it's Sunday. So it was Saturday morning, Sunday at 11, go to do the Emmy to the funeral home, and then Wednesday at 3. And that's the timeline of my life that week. Everything else is just a blur.
So from Saturday to Sunday with a hope, and then from Sunday to Wednesday with a promise.
Right. Exactly.
Got it.
And then I don't even think we knew. I'm trying to remember when we finally knew when the funeral was going to be because they kept having to move it. And then the funeral being Friday morning. So, when people talk about the date, 11/11/23, it's like, yes, I know that's his end of watch. For me, it's Saturday, Sunday at 11, Wednesday at 3, Friday morning funeral. So yeah, did I answer the
Yeah,
question?
totally. So we are Sunday
Mm-hmm.
at the funeral home,
Mm-hmm.
and they've moved him to the funeral home
Uh-huh.
now. What's the next thing? Because I imagine at this point now, for lack of a better term, the respect machine is turning at a pretty high rate, and you're having to make a lot of mildly unwelcome decisions.
Yes. Um, I did have a lot of people that took over, and a big part of that was handling his family, which I was grateful for peer support doing. And then you have the honor guard team that's managing the funeral preparations and all of that, and getting him dressed and ready for me to see and all of that. And then you have the patrol side of it, and some of his best friends on patrol were the ones that were managing, helping the family come in, dealing with the parents, and getting them to see him at the funeral home. All that simultaneously going on where my house is full and people are coming in. But now you have to pull pictures, choose music, write obituaries. Um, and who better to do that? I can't delegate that. I have to start. Now flowers are coming in, meals are starting to come. People want to come by, phone calls. A friend of mine had my phone for days, just trying to handle where should we stay, who's coming, what are we doing, we'll be here. You know, People need to eat, right? Food's rolling in, meal trains are being set up. And the type of person that I am, I knew, again, instinctively, that if I didn't allow people to help, because what would you want to do?
Yeah,
By
everybody
allowing them
wants
to
to help.
help, I'm letting them, by saying no or get away from me or don't help me, that just compounds their pain, right? And so they went and bought a refrigerator to house the stuff so they were happy to have a job to do. We'll run to
Yeah.
Home Depot. We'll go get food. We'll call this person. Everybody just wanted to help. Let's get you in the shower. Have you eaten? I knew they needed that, so I allowed them to do that. But it's like I sacrificed myself in essence. But I knew if I turned off, if I got in my bed, I would never get out.
Yeah.
And so as many people that wanted to sleep in my bed, doors open, music on, TV on, it it was chaos, but I was terrified for it to be silent. I mean, there was a moment, John, where I laid on my shower floor and I was like, how do you waterboard yourself? Like, I literally remember thinking that. Like, is there a way to and then I will just peacefully go in this shower. It just was so much. There was so much noise. Even when it's silent. Uh, so it's just a lot. So then you have to and everything's a timeline. They need the obituary. They need it. Kim, we hate to bother you, but they do need this. I can't let anyone else write it, right? So, because I knew I would regret it. I knew if I turned everything over to everyone, because I already didn't get to go see him. And
Yeah.
that's part. I'm like, well, I'm gonna get to do something I know that I should do. And I need to be strong and I need to do this for George. And I can't have anyone else write it. And as I was writing it, I remembered that Tecumseh poem from Act of Valor, that movie. I don't know if you know that. It's so good. And it clicked. It was like he spoke to me. And then it's just like it just flowed. The whole thing just flowed. And it was uh so healing, and it made me feel like I did something for him. Like he knows. Like I came through. Um and then picking pictures and music, and originally it was supposed to be at a big church, and so it was like you need music for when we bring him in, music when you take him out, transitions between who's going to speak, right? Who's going to speak at this? Who do you want there? Who do you not want there? I don't know, right? Whoever needs to go needs to go. We do open casket, closed casket. Now we're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Now it's here. Now it's switched. And now that changes. And I think they came lights and sirens to get the flash drive with the pictures on it because I kept changing it and couldn't finish it. And was, and they were trying to give me time, but saying, you need to get this done. And it was, everyone's walking on eggshells, but shit needs to get done.
Yeah.
And they're doing this incredibly beautiful, very logistically challenging service while also being sad and grieving. And you're talking about guys who were with him on scene now being pallbearers. And so imagine what they're processing and then seeing him. So did I answer your question?
It's fantastic.
Thank you. It go off my brain.
So we're working our way towards Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next significant event?
I would say Wednesday. I don't even really remember Monday, Tuesday, just trying to get things done, people coming. I know I was terrifying looking. I'd glance at myself in the mirror and be like, oh my gosh, I never knew you could literally care nothing about everything. Like nothing.
I think you get a free pass for that one.
Just so weird to just literally not care about anything, except for getting certain things right. So I was looking forward to Wednesday, and a group of people went with me, and we got to the funeral home, and two of his best friends brought me into the room, and he looked so beautiful. And he was, of course, in a beautiful casket in his uniform, and really hard to see because now this is the first time I'm seeing him since Friday night. I haven't ever gone that long without seeing him. Maybe a short weekend trip, and it's not him, but it's him. And so they brought me over to him, and then when I was ready, they gave me some time alone. And I think I kissed him they were like, Kim, you can't, like, they knew. They're like, you can't, like, don't push, don't do anything too crazy. And I just talked to him and I just kissed him. And I could tell everything that wasn't really him, but they did a really good job. And I don't know how long I stayed in there. It was very, very hard to leave. I think maybe someone came in and said, okay. But I asked everybody who was there, I said, how did you feel when you first got here compared to now after you saw him? And they were like, I just feel so at peace seeing him like that. Especially the guys who saw him not great Saturday morning. And so that's when I made a really tough decision because George had never wanted an open casket. But I decided that it would be important for certain people to be able to see him the way that we all just saw him. And then we talked about funeral arrangements and things that we would want. And they had to ask a bunch of questions and you sign a bunch of papers. And I remember hugging the officers. They have someone always outside the door. And I'd forgotten about that because George has done that so many times. And I remember hugging, it was a female officer and she was so sweet and she could hardly look at me, and she's like, I'm so sorry. And I just said, thank you for being here with him. She goes, of course. And, they take shifts and so it's like I knew he was at peace and in good hands, but if I would have stayed there forever. But, you have decisions to make, and we got in the car and went home. That, I was so happy to finally see him though, but I just felt like I was leaving him. So I don't know if there's anything that can satisfy that void. I think that you're constantly looking for something to make you feel better. So you look forward to that thing. So Sunday was that thing. Wednesday was that thing. Friday was that thing. But there's really nothing. But that little chase makes it so you can, get through the day. That little next nugget, that carrot, right? Like, okay, get through this, get through this, get through this.
Well, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking if you had seen him right afterwards, right? Traumatized, bloody, that would be the impression you're left with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as traumatic as that was, it's an interesting balance
For sure.
because it did seeing him in his uniform, cleaned up, prepared.
Yeah.
You were left with this peaceful image of him. And I think that that's probably what they were trying to ensure happened.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, I don't, again, like so many of these things, I don't know what the right answer is. And I think there's 1,000 wrong answers and one right answer, but if there is even a right answer.
Right.
But as I hearing you describe it this time and walking, because we haven't really walked through the whole process yet, walking through the whole process, it did give you a certain sense of peace
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think you would have gotten seeing him right afterwards.
I would have to agree with that. And I've really tried to dig in deep and really try to unpack my feelings. And I think a lot of it boils down that I just feel like I wasn't there for him.
Yeah.
And that thinking of him dying alone or not, again, because we don't know what happens, right? You see these shows where people hover above their body. I don't know.
He didn't die alone. He died with his brothers.
Yeah. And then once I was able to get more information about that, especially the one teammate of his who was really there with him from that moment all the way to the hospital, I got so much peace from that.
Yeah.
But that moment, right, it's like, again, talking about it with all the knowledge I now have.
Right. Yeah.
But there might just need to be some level of, you can get her to the hospital. They can brief me on the way that you may or may not get to see him. But we want to honor your wishes. But please know, we might get to the hospital. There's probably going to be hundreds of officers. We can try to get you through the back. You may or may not be able to hold his hand. You may or may not be able to see him. And then it's my burden to bear.
Interesting. So it's a question to some degree of agency.
Yes, very
Having
much so.
control over what is going to happen after the fact.
Very much so. And it's easier for them when you really think about it. Because now the onus is on me. Now but they've briefed me in a very compassionate way, in a professional manner, that this is what I asked for. Okay, we'll take you. But
Yeah.
once you get there, please know XYZ. Now I'm in the car moving as opposed to standing in my kitchen entertaining with the time to think. And we pull up. It's probably a scene out of you can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, all of those officers, what is their first instinct to do when they hear an officer's been shot? What'd they all do?
Go to the hospital.
So in what world would I not want the same?
Yeah.
They're not going to do anything. They can't perform any life-saving measures. You just go there. And I don't know what that is. Why, again, instinctively as humans, why? Right? They should have all, so now you have hundreds of officers not on the streets, but they needed to be there.
Yeah.
They needed to be there, whether they knew him well or not.
Yeah.
It was one of their own.
That's a very interesting way to look at that.
Right? So
yeah.
That's instinctively, no question. Officer involved shooting, what does everybody do?
Go to the hospital.
One of
Yeah.
our guys is hit. What do we do? Right? Instinctively. They get there and it's like, they don't know what they're going to do. None of them can go see George, but they're there.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
In support of one another, just to pay homage, to say, like, we stand together. I don't know. instinctively, boom, turn the car around, we're at the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very valid point. And like we said, there's a certain amount of agency, right? Of like, you are in control of what is going to now happen. And I imagine as you're working your way towards Friday and this thing, the respect machine, for lack of a better term, is now rolling.
Mhm.
And it's like a snowball. It's
Mhm.
getting bigger, and there's going to be more services and more people that want to speak and all of that. I can see where that's going to become progressively more overwhelming. Like, it's great. I'm sure it's wonderful to have them honor him, but I imagine from your perspective, that's also kind of terrifying and overwhelming.
I I mean, Kim, the mayor wants to speak with you. What?
Yeah.
Right? Um, and then, you have the day of, and while they were doing, I guess the viewing, you call it, we're in a trailer. So it was at COTA, which is Circuit of the Americas, which is where they do the,
Yeah, it's a big Formula One venue.
yeah. So we're in these trailers where, uh, people can sit and there's refreshments and, you know, chiefs from Colorado, New York, Florida are wanting to pay their respects, say hello. Some fallen officer, they'll give you like a check and a patch. And I, I mean, and it's not, I realized instantly it was not out of obligation. This really matters to them
Mm,
that they send somebody, that they're driving, flying across the country,
yes.
that SWAT teams are coming from all over, that fire departments and EMS and honor guards from everywhere. And I'm talking to George. I'm like, baby, this is you. Like, this is you. Uh, I don't know that anyone could have gotten all those different entities under one roof. He was
Right.
so proud to be a firefighter. He was so proud to be a paramedic, so proud of Honor Guard. He was so proud of earning that spot on SWAT. He was so proud of everything he did, of the cast, of SRT, and having everybody work together, and firefighters and paramedics and cops, and how many lives we can save working together. And like Chief Henderson said at his funeral, and I learned a lot about George because how could he tell me everything that happened at work? We had very little alone time and it was our time.
Right.
So now I have people lined up to tell me their story of George. And I'm just falling more in love with him.
Yeah.
And I knew he was humble, but holy shit, like these are people saying, I went for this promotion. I went back to school because of him. I tried this because of him. He's the one who encouraged me to do this. I train more because of him. Um, he was the only one that was nice to me, like dispatchers, or he always had a smile on his face, or he was always so respectful and courteous and all these things that I knew. But to hear it like that, it's like, wow. And for the chief to say he trained to save lives, not take lives, and to get into law enforcement when he did after being a beloved firefighter and karate instructor in 2019. And then we know 2020 was the protests and the defunding. And he's at protests getting spit on and things thrown at him. And I'm like, this is a person who got into this to save lives and to help people.
Yeah.
And so that was really, really hard. So then to see it completely come around full circle and have all of these departments come from all over, that's when I really had like, oh, wow, like this is real. This really matters to them. And some of them still reach out. They still check on me. It's gotten much quieter, obviously, but um, it was beautiful. But I'm still at the knock on the door. Like my
Yeah.
brain can't catch up, right? So it's overwhelming, but I'm trying to be gracious. I'm representative now of George, of this person that is being put on a higher and higher pedestal with every story, and I'm the representative of him. That's how I felt.
Hmm.
And I need to carry that humility and that he was just such a great person, and that respect and that measured demeanor that he had. And you could have just had beef with him and he'll see you the next day. Hello, sir. Handshake. Always said hello, eye contact, so respectful, respected the chain of command, all of those things. So, and I can be a little loose cannon, like a little mouthy. And so I really just had to be a representative of him. And it made me a better person to get through it that way.
It's a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
especially in this state of grief that you are. That's a lot to take on. And I don't know how you don't feel that way, but I don't think people would think that you would feel that way, right? I think we tend to think of the survivors as kind of in their own, dealing with their own things,
Hmm.
not feeling responsibility to act and be a certain way as a representative. Like that's a lot.
It was a lot. But I was so proud of him. And I knew, well, I didn't know then, I realize now, and it's a tough pill to swallow. There's no redos. You don't get to go, well, next time that happens, here's what I'm gonna do. Um, it's like the train's moving
Yeah.
and you're either on it or you're not. And you try to have as much of an impact on the process as possible. And his service was beautiful and honor guard. I will still say that APD's honor guard is the sharpest. Um, so respectful, the service that they threw together, and the owner of Coda, and last minute, and what they were able to do, and the people that showed up, and how early people had to get there and wait, the traffic, and a 16-mile backup procession. I mean, they shut down Austin on a Friday morning, drove him through downtown, put him in the Bearcat, like all the things. It was so beautiful. But you have news people reaching out to you. People don't realize that. Everybody wants a quote or something. And of course, I didn't want to talk to any of them. And, they're asking if they can live stream it. And it's a big question. And I thought, well, he's got family all over and people that can't come. I didn't really know what that meant. I'm like, okay, YouTube, like what? What are you asking me? I don't even understand. So they can, and I was like, well, that's nice for someone who can't make it to be able to watch this, because it becomes a line of duty death funeral is remarkable. And my dad's buried at Arlington National, and so he had um, so my two favorite people in the world had the most honorable funerals, and everyone needed to see that, and it impacted everyone. Um, it made people want to be better people. There was guys. Some of my friends' husbands were like, I feel like a loser. I'm gonna get out there, and you start to think like, what impact have you made? And they talk about, the dash, that time between what have you done? And so it's amazing that he still impacted so many people even through that. So I'm so proud of him, and for him to be honored that way, I'm so grateful for.
Well, and I think that's why we do it, right? Like we need that
Hmm.
as a society. We need to deify George, right? He represents what we want people to be,
Right.
and so as much as the ceremony of it is a burden, it also sounds like it was also a blessing.
Oh, it was beautiful. Um, and even though I couldn't fully understand, I don't want to say appreciate, that's not the right word, because I appreciate everything that was done. And having been to funerals, that was another moment of fuckery, pardon my French, but I remember going to funerals and always sitting in, it wasn't even about the officer anymore. I just was like the front row. Like, who's in the front row?
Yeah.
How is this affecting the front row? And it affects so many people on such a deep level. And there's like tentacles of the impact it has on the community and the lives that it touches and the people and children and the parents and on and on and on, right? And And you never want it to become a measurement. I never wanted anyone to feel they couldn't grieve because my grief should be less than your grief, right? Like, how dare I say I miss George? Of course, you miss George more. And so I wanted to make sure that people knew it would never be a measurement of grief.
Yeah. Don't
Don't do
compare
that.
traumas.
It's all, as a matter of fact, I recognized their trauma, which made it harder for me. But also, that's what allowed me to say we need to let people help and get involved and help with the foundation and volunteer and all the things that they do because we're healing together.
Yeah. Okay, so you get through the services, and now you got to go home.
So, yeah, I don't even, there's little bits and pieces when you have something like that happen. I was convinced they didn't do the final 42. I remember saying to somebody, like, I'm so glad they didn't do that for George. Like,
Doing that 21 gun salute?
No, the final 42 when the dispatchers call in.
Oh, yeah.
And like, because I'd heard that done so many times, and that's a kill. There's those moments at funerals that are just those. You hear the bagpipes, you hear, there's just those moments.
Yeah,
where
if I
it's just
never
like,
hear another bagpipe, I will not care. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have to do it. I get it. But
Oh my gosh.
I would just like to hear something happy played on bagpipes would be good.
Whew, yeah.
Song I like, something.
So it's those moments, and oddly enough, I would have put $1 million on the table. They didn't do those at George's funeral. I blocked it. I literally blocked it out. And so it all ends and people come up to you, and I remember, having both of my boys' hands, and all I wanted to do was slither off my chair, get in the fetal position, and just tell me when it's over. And it was like, Kim, stay in your seat, hold the boys, like I was focusing so much energy on just staying upright in the chair. It's probably why I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
And part of the deal with them streaming it was that they were to not focus on me, wait for that money shot of the widow crying and getting the flag and all that. And they were very respectful of that. So they carry him out, and we all get back in our respective vehicles. And so there's kind of like a procession convoy, if you will. And we're following the Bearcat, and I'm just so exhausted and so out of it. I don't even know. And all I remember is him going straight, and we turned right.
Mm.
And I didn't understand. And I'm like, oh my God, again. It was like saying goodbye to him again. And then I realized I hadn't gone up to the coffin at the service because I didn't want thousands of people to watch me see him. And we went to my house because everybody was on their way over.
And you're back to being an entertainer.
Back to being an entertainer. And I loved every human that was in my home. I was just blown away by their love and their support and wanting to be there for me. I think nobody knew what they were coming to Austin. Everybody was like, what just happened? I mean, that is an impactful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just wow, right? And so I wish I would have, and I don't know if it was even an option, and what would I have done? Followed him to wherever they were taking him is where I really wanted to go. So it was that kind of difficult moment again, get back to the house, prep the house, everyone's coming over, and then I believe we were there that weekend, and then I flew to Florida where it was Thanksgiving week, and we did another couple of memorial services type things for him.
Yeah, and I mean, you are going to be going into a cycle of memorial service ad nauseum. I mean, how many? I'm not going to drag you through all of them,
Well,
but how many different events?
So there were there was a 5-day period where there were 6 events in that 5-day period, to the point where one of my friends came over and like, let's talk about what you're going to wear. I'm like, what I'm going to wear? She goes, Kim, this is crazy. Like, I don't even know how you're getting to, who's going with you. You're signed up for this, what's happening. And it was all beautiful, what they wanted to do, but compounded by the fact that it was SWAT. So, TTPOA conference comes out and they do a beautiful tribute to him and a what do you call it? Like a run and gun, like a timed.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing of all the stuff. I'm like, George would freaking love this. And so that felt great. And then they had me, at the banquet, and they awarded him with SWAT Officer of the Year. And that was beautiful. And then APD has their own awards. And then APD has their own memorial where they put them on their wall. Of course, there's Texas Peace Officer Memorial. And of course, there's Police Week. And then in between, you have people that want to present you with a check, or they run from here to there in George's name. Or, I mean, we had a San Antonio boxer that wore George's name on his trunks. Would we come to the fight? So it's things that you don't even think of. And a lot of people are like, well, Kim, you can say no. I said, which would you have me say no to?
Yeah.
They're honoring
exactly.
my husband for what he went through. And what would you have me say no to? And what would I do instead?
Yeah.
Sit home?
Yeah.
But
it's still overwhelming.
It's
right?
overwhelming.
It's the right course of action,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still a rough course of action.
It's rough. And you have to fight against you fight against the overwhelming nature of it by being grateful, because the last thing that anybody wants is for their loved one to be forgotten.
Yeah.
And so this is what keeps them alive and makes what happened matter.
Yeah. Yeah, but would it, and we can talk about it lessons learned, but it may be better to space those things out a little bit more.
Probably. Probably. I was shocked by, because even Titusville does on their American Police Hall of Fame. Literally, it's always I believe, Friday after Police Week. They honor any fallen officer and put their name on a wall. And my sister had to attend that for me because I couldn't do all the things. And, George, of course, Honor Guard has been to Police Week. He's presented a rose to a widow. I have pictures of him there. And of course, my dad's buried there. So that was just an emotional time. And everyone tries to warn you. And you do get widows that reach out. That I have met some wonderful women, and they say words, and you're just like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly how I feel. And so that's very helpful. And I think even for guys that have been through this, any traumatic situation, to get around people who have been through the same thing is very helpful, because it validates what's going on. It helps explain what you're feeling. And so getting with them, but these things all take time. And interestingly enough, the people that wait to reach out are the people that know how you feel the most.
Yeah.
So those are the people that you really need to hear from, but they know that you need to take a beat. They know, or they'll reach out to their support officer and say, listen, I'm ready to call Kim. Here's my number. When she's ready.
Yeah. Have her call me.
Yeah. And a lot of times you don't want to do that. And then once I did that once, I was like, this is amazing. And there's some you jive with and some you don't, because again, so as you can imagine, it's the tougher women that have all also started foundations or done big things, or so you kind of find your crew, you find your little tribe of people. It's a club. They always say that nobody wants to welcome you into and nobody wants to be a part of, but we get through it together. We all know each other's end of watches. We know where they're at. And it was good for me to find out very early on that even at the 10, 11, 12-year mark, it's not any easier. It was better for me to just hear it right off the bat, because a lot of people say, just get through the first year. Everything will be okay. You'll be better. Best is you'll find love again. And you're just like, okay. So for them to just go, look, the best way to describe it is grief is a 10-pound rock. It feels like a 2,000-pound something you're dragging, but grief's a 10-pound rock, right? And it's heavy. It's in your pocket, weighs you down, but it stays the same weight, but you get stronger around it. So it feels lighter, but it doesn't go away. And once you know that, it's one less thing to even worry about. Okay, this is the reality of it. How do we move forward?
Yeah, you stop asking yourself, when's this going to stop?
When am I going to feel better? Just never. You're not. It'll get lighter. You'll have more okay days.
Yeah.
And then those okay days, like, oh, you'll have a good hour, right? And maybe you'll have a good 2 hours. Um, and then you're like, okay, I didn't cry quite as much today. And then you figure out, why didn't you? Well, I was productive. I went to lunch with the guys. I reached out to somebody, and it's the big things that people think are the hardest, like Valentine's Day and all those things. And those aren't the hard things. It's just the little stuff that hit you like a ton of bricks and come out of nowhere. And when you like to control your own chaos and when you're a controlling person and it hits you out of nowhere, it's shocking. So it just takes a minute you have to just relinquish to it and let grief in and feel it. And I call it feel the suck, embrace the suck, and just sooner you come in, as soon as you come to terms with that, it doesn't make it better, but just relieves you of one extra obstacle.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, one of the things that is we've talked through this and hearing you today, there are a ton of kind of innate contradictions
Mm-hmm.
that occur here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of them are obvious. You want people around, you want to be by yourself, but I don't think all of them are. And I think it would be good to kind of just walk through some of like the things that you're feeling, the things that you're thinking that are that have these kind of contradictory sides to them.
Yeah. Because you're always trying to seek something that makes you feel better, right? So it's ask me, but don't talk to me, right? Or say something, but don't say any of these things. Or just know. Just look at me and know, right? Because sometimes you feel like you have to go, my heart is pounding out of my chest right now. I feel like I'm going to die. Um, but I have to play it cool. And the interesting thing that I've realized is people want you how they need you. So then you end up grieving or acting how you think that person can handle you best. That
Mm,
makes sense.
that makes perfect sense, but that's a really ugly thought to think.
It is, because they say, "Oh, you can say anything to me. I can take it." And then I say, "Well, how are you today?" This is the worst question ever. Now everybody knows not to answer it. And we bought all these books and we've helped people understand the griever, the grieving, how to be around a grieving person. And it's it's just really tough because, how are you? So now I go full truth, half truth. Do you need a lie? What do
Yeah.
you need today?
Yeah. I'm fine, fucked
Well,
up, insecure,
yeah,
neurotic, and emotional.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, today just fucking sucks. Well, at least, and don't start a question. Don't even start a comment with at least. There's no at least. Today just sucks so bad. And so but also, and then you start to worry about what people think, because people will say, if this happened to me, fill in the blanks, I would be in my room crying all day. I wouldn't be able to do anything. So are you saying that you love your person more? Are you saying that I'm grieving inappropriately, but you just told me grieve how so it's like, and then am I talking about it too much? And then you feel like a burden, right? Because they invite you to things. So it's like, keep inviting. Well, I really don't want invitations. I never did before, but you don't have to invite me to anything. But now you're putting me in a position to have to say no. But you're telling me it's okay to say no to other people that ask me. But now you've asked me and you think it's best that I should go to this and be around these people. And it's only 6 people or it's only 7 people. I'm like, 7 people, that's a lot. Right. And then you just feel like you're doing it wrong. And then people say, well, there's no right or wrong way. But you're also telling me that I need to get up, put my feet on the floor. George would want you to do this. Just be happy. But you just got done telling me that I should grieve how I want to grieve, and that it's not linear and there's going to be, right? And so it's very difficult to really say, well, I don't care what other people think. I'm just going to do, but you can't walk through the grocery store crying. You got to get through it, right? You got to get through it. And then there's the people that say, well, just get over it, or you'll be over it soon. And I don't want to get over it. And what makes you think I want to feel good again? Because this pain is what connects me to George. This pain is what connects me to George. It's all my love with nowhere to go. So this pain is love, right? Feeling like I need to do something overcommits me, and now I'm overwhelmed. But if I don't have these commitments, what am I getting up to do every day, right? Let other people help, but say no to everybody. It's just constant contradiction.
How can those around you make that better?
I think individually, there's people that are just going to fall off because they just can't deal. And that's okay. And it may be in a couple years, you run into each other, everybody's in a better spot, and they go, my bad, I couldn't deal. And that's fine. I don't expect anybody to know how to do this. I don't know how to do it. I just think in my case, and again, woe is me, I had a lot of people. So if I had 3 people trying to figure it out, we probably could have figured it out together. But because of who George was, just my Florida people alone, and now they're distant. Are you going to move? Are you moving back here? Because they need me to be close. Like, no, I feel good here. I like our house here. Well, isn't the house going to remind you of George? And there are some days I want to rip all the pictures down. And then there's days where I can't get back home fast enough, right? And he's everywhere. But is he there? Does he, So I just think in my case, because you don't want people to not talk about it, but then there's times when you don't want them to talk about it. But if they don't talk about it, you're mad they're not talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? And then you want to go, but did you forget? You remember, right? And they're like, of course I remember, but I thought if I talked about it, I would upset you. But now I'm upset because you didn't talk about it.
So what's the right question?
I
run into you in a grocery store. What's the right question?
It's not even a question. It's more the people that go, I think of you all the time. I think of you every day. I pray for you every day. I'm always here for you if you need anything. I don't want to answer any questions. Answering questions requires thought. You can say you're thinking of me and I can say nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have to respond to that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that. But like, if I ask you, how are you doing? I'm asking you to look inside the box and see what's going on inside of there.
Now, there's different people that ask, and I know why they're asking. And, the way you've reached out to me has always been very, it's always filled my heart and been appropriate because of who you are and what I know you've been through and what I know you do for a living. So I know that when you're saying it, it's coming from a space of you really pretty much know what I'm going through. So you're not doing it with a lack of emotional intelligence where it's like, dumb question, John. It's not a dumb question when you ask it.
Interesting.
Right? Because I know why you're asking me. You're not asking me like, you're literally saying, how are you dealing with this horrific grief that you're experiencing? You're asking me that. And I know you are because I know why you're asking. But in a grocery store, a random stranger, it's a dumb question.
Interesting.
Because you're not going to stand here long enough for me to tell you the truth. You can't handle the truth, right? And
it's like people ask, how you doing?
Right.
You're not going to give me the time to emotionally dump on you. So let's just say fine.
Right. Yeah. And then if you decide to then tell me how I should fix it, you're probably going to get a punch to the throat, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, what my friend did, or last year when my dog died, or when my dad died, what I did was, and I would just get with friends, we'd go to the movies and drink wine. And I'm like I feel my fists curling,
Yeah. And the thing is, again, this is the contradictions, right? Because they're trying to make you feel better.
Right.
Right. But at the same time, like it's making you want to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never thought of it. You put it beautifully a few minutes ago, which was that when I'm asking you to be the way that I need you to be for me to feel okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I want you to tell me I'm fine, because then I can walk away and feel like, oh, she's fine. No big deal.
Yeah.
We can move on. Right. And I think, one of the things that you and I have talked about is there is always going to be this is here. This is losing your arm, right? Like you're not going to recover from this and be like, oh, everything's fine. It's permanently revectored your life. But I think that having people And this goes back to agency, right? It is surrounding yourself with people that are legitimately know who you are and
Yes.
get you
Mhm.
and are going to care in a way that is meaningful, but then also kind of separating. And this is where I think, limited number of people, putting people between you and the outside world, these are all things that kind of buffer to some degree
Yeah, and
the
there is a
impact.
level of civilian and police.
Yeah.
My friends had no idea that this they knew and they had no idea just, I always say, I know it's hard being a cop, but try being in love with one,
Yeah.
right? And so now they're jumping into this. They see stuff like this on the news occasionally, but this is like a holy shit moment for a lot of people,
Yeah.
myself included. And so my regular, everyday, lifelong friends, I feel like I have nothing in common with because anything they want to go do, like, what am I going to do? Go get my nails? I don't want to do anything like that. And now when I'm around the officers, particularly the ones that were on the call, we're already 10 steps ahead of meeting each other in an emotional state. We can get past all this bullshit in the beginning to get you up to speed to where I am as we talk about the next thing. They know we're all just devastated, brokenhearted. Like, I
Yeah.
don't have to get them up to speed where I have to go, imagine what it's like every night when I come home and no one's home. Go to bed alone, I wake up alone, and then it's, well, at least you had that beautiful love, you know? Yeah, and I still freaking want it.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
I
You put
you
it,
know?
we had a conversation a week ago and you broke my heart in the conversation. You said, imagine when everything's going wrong and the person that can fix it, you can't have, which was just, I think of all the times I've heard that expressed, that was the most clear manifestation of everything is going wrong and the one that you've turned to your whole life to make it right is the one that's now not available. And I think that if you start from that premise in dealing with people who are in this situation, if you start with that premise
Mhm.
of where they are, throughout our conversation, it's coming back to agency. It's coming back to you having control over what is going to happen.
Mhm.
Um, and enough control that you feel like you're in charge, but not enough control that you have to return every phone call.
Another contradiction, right?
Yes.
I was so happy
Yeah.
for the stuff I didn't have to deal with,
Yeah.
but then mad about the stuff I didn't get a say in.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have it both ways, and I know that. And so,
I mean, it's a shit sandwich, right?
it's a
There's no
shit
good way to eat
sandwich.
it. Like,
There's
it's
no
just,
good way to eat it, and, especially for me and depending upon the type of person you are, George not only was my person, but he was really, truly the only one that could handle me, quite frankly. I was always the one people came to.
yeah.
Even as Kim will go tell him or have her do that, or Kim will take care of you, or just call Kim. She'll know what to say. Because I'll give it to you straight. So you either want it or you don't. And so then when that would take its toll on me, or he was what could him like take it down a notch, or um, and so then to not have that, I had to rely on what I know he would say to me without having him there. And then the physical comfort of just the touch, the smell, him being close, and to know you're never going to have that again. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's honestly terrifying. And I never knew what a panic attack was, or I mean, I would say for 6 months, I woke up to a beating heart that initially beat so loud through my bed and pillow that I thought it was bass in a car outside. And just trying to manage uh, the just the physical symptoms of stress and grief was and then you don't eat, you don't sleep, you just keep functioning somehow, and then you have work and life and bills, and let's not even talk about all the paperwork that has to be filed, all of the things that have to change, who paid the bills, who did, every day. I mean, it was just stacks of stuff that had to be taken care of. And my friends couldn't do it. They're asking security questions. And so then they'd have to ask me anyway. And your insurance changes, your job, your leave, your pay, his stuff, come to the station. You got to fill out this, you got to do that. And you're just like, just a zombie, just autopilot.
What could have made, looking forward now, and I kind of want to like start thinking through like your lessons
Yeah.
learned here,
Yep.
right? So what if you were now designing this process for somebody else,
hmm
what would you do?
As impersonal as it sounds, I feel like if you just pull up this sheet that's already been completed. You know who to contact, you know where to go, you know next of kin, you know that you're going to have the support officer there. And then there's a checklist, a flow chart, algorithm, whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Notify wife, these 3 things are most likely going to happen. She says yes to this, go on to the next box. Obviously, you wouldn't do that in front of the person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you need to, and that takes away, because you're already going to have somebody that's emotionally traumatized themselves. I don't care how strong of a person, how many line of duty deaths you've done. It's traumatic for the person notifying the person as well. So if you can remove what's right, what should I do? No, this is our protocol. And we know this to work best because it's been created through our peer support team, through people who have done hundreds of line of duty death notifications, through trauma therapists who have said, this is why closure is important. This is why taking them to the hospital, if that's what they prefer. It should have been, would you like to go to the hospital? Yes or no.
Yeah.
Right? It should have been, it shouldn't have been, I shouldn't have, again, the questions. And I, in general, just don't like to be asked a lot of questions that just for sake of asking. So I would have looked for more guidance.
Yeah. It almost strikes me that it's almost 2 different people. It's almost a person who is there to support you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that friend that's, whatever, but then it's almost like somebody who is not emotionally involved in the situation, who has some objectivity that can come in and say, "Here's the 5 things you need to do," or "Here's the 5 things we
Mm-hmm.
need to do," and is not is more clinical, for lack of a better
Yes.
term?
Yes. Because those other people in your life are going to provide that support. And there's nothing the notification person can do.
Yeah, it's
What are they going
and to
to?
some degree, they're almost better off notifying and leaving because it is
And that's
yeah.
how one of the therapists I spoke to, she did ER notifications, and then she did it for Border Patrol or something. And then she taught and wrote a book about it. And it was through the course of her time. But every single time, the notification, they teach you how to do it. It's very quick. It's very factual. It's very quick. They leave, care team comes in, but it's never more than 2 people. And it should be somebody that wants to do this. And I know that sounds terrible. Nobody wants to, but I mean, nobody wants to interview a victim of child abuse. But if you're good at it,
Yeah, nobody wants to be on the honor guard, right? But somebody does.
it's somebody does.
Yeah.
And so you find those people, that person, and just like any other thing in the department, maybe every 6 months they have a training on it, or they talk about best practices or what some other departments are doing. And but hope isn't a plan. Hope it's not going to happen isn't a plan. And even with the other officer who was shot, there was a notification process involved to take her to the hospital and to notify them that her husband had been shot.
Yeah.
There's still something to be said about that. You don't know what's going to happen from the time you notify them to the time they get to the hospital. But the same thing. Who are you sending and why? Why are you in front of this person's door?
That's a really good way to look at it. Is there needs to be a purpose.
Why are you here?
Yeah.
What is your role?
And
How are you?
redefine that role so
Mhm.
that it's almost like, the team talked about their trauma pit crew,
Mhm.
and everybody has a role in the trauma pit crew.
Right.
This is almost like a trauma pit crew for line of duty death or line of
Exactly.
duty injury, where it's like Everybody that goes has a specific purpose to help the family do X, Y, or Z.
I mean, on a very basic level of being a human, we do better with a purpose. In any case, we do
Yeah.
better with a purpose.
Well, and like you said, hope is not a course of action, right?
Mm-mm.
It's not. And I think that so often, like as a guy who's spending, a lot of my time talking to people that have been affected by line of duty deaths, line of duty, OISs, um, so often the agencies don't have a plan. Like they have a plan, they don't really have a plan. And it doesn't survive first contact, right? That initial, oh my God, now what do we do? I think barring your case, I think in the last 50 people I've interviewed, most of their trauma came from the way that they were handled after the event.
Hmm.
I think that objectively, Austin did a really good job.
They did.
Like they got a lot of things
They
right.
did.
And I've definitely seen it done worse. But I think that's part of what's instructive here,
Yeah.
right? Is there's got to be a plan ahead of time. People have to be identified. Information has to be provided. It has to be very instantly accessible. And I think we've got to give you the agency to make the decisions, but not at the same time hand you 5,000 things to decide that 4,999 of which don't really matter.
And at the end of the day, John, they're human beings. Just because you wear a badge, just because you're in this position doesn't mean you're going to do this well. And I think that there's a gentleman in Texas. I can name him if we want to.
Please go ahead.
His name is Tim Cresta, and he's been phenomenal and so helpful to me. But he's probably done over 50 line of duty death, some notifications and funerals, and they would call him in all areas of Texas. Like, just call Tim. Like Tim knows what to do, and he still is a resource for families as they move into their benefits and how do we do this? And I didn't know what to do. And how do we do this? And he's very knowledgeable. And he has a fantastic plan and idea and dream of every state having like a governor maybe appointed or a state position of a line of duty death notification specialist or whatever that may be. And of course, that person wouldn't be able to go right away because it's a time sensitive thing. So it's going to have to be the chief, the support officer, like we spoke about, and possibly a chaplain or a victim services peer support person. But that then we take this best practice or protocol, very different than an SOP because it's really just best practice to give them some guidance because it's gonna vary how it goes. But that then they're able to go and just train those specific people who would be. So whether it's a branch of peer support, whether it's a branch of in your department, who have you determined these people to be and who's doing your line of duty notifications? And furthermore, what is your protocol for it? And it's either we have no protocol whatsoever, we just wing it, we haven't had to do one in 15 years. There's going to be a varying amount of answers. And it's like, well, you can see, especially with social media, how many line of duty deaths there are now. And if you're caught off guard, it can be very detrimental to the spouse, the family, the department, everybody notifying. So 4 hours, 3 hours, let's talk about this or let's put something into place. And then to have that database, in addition to that, to have where you can go into Jorge Pastore, spouse Kim Pastore, here's all the things that needed to happen. Here's what did happen. Here's what's pending. Here's who took care of it. So if that one person at the department who's doing all of that stuff, whether it's for workman's comp, getting their last paycheck, all those things that need to take place, they can see where you're at in the process. So if they promote out, they're on vacation, if they retire, that someone can go in and go, here's where we're at and pick up where we left off. Not, oh, I think we did that form. I don't know. What does it look like? I don't know. I think someone said something about it because there's a lot that happens. And so
This might be a year-long checklist.
yeah, there's still stuff that's coming up or that I haven't received or and then there's benefits out there with every department, where they pay dues to CLEAT, for example, or they pay dues to something. And in those dues, there is a line of duty death benefit, whether it's $1,000. But if someone doesn't know that,
They never get it.
And then there's benefits for people who have, dependents living in their home. You own your home. There's, you know, uh, property tax benefits in certain states. So
It almost seems there has to be like a benefit coordinator
mhm.
who is the person that
And that's all they do.
yeah, that's
And
all
that's
they do.
someone who
They're a
has
specialist.
decided, like, I'll take care of this because I
Yeah.
want to help people. Again, they're only human and it's a lot to do and it can be overwhelming. And then, they handle other things too. And they were also handling the other officer who was shot because they have to go through some workman's comp. Suddenly you're not working anymore. What needs to happen? Things have to get filed and done and paperwork has to be completed. So
And I
it's
mean,
the
we
ugly part of
documented it.
it.
Yeah, I mean, John was injured pretty seriously.
Oh,
So yeah, I
big
mean,
time.
that's it's the
And
same thing. Now the agency is tasked twice.
twice. And more happened for the department that weekend. I don't know if you know, but more did happen. And so they had a lot going on. So I think that putting these things in place only helps the people that are tasked with this very difficult job, you know? Um, and every line of duty death matters, but they're all going to be very different. And some are going to be more critical and impactful in the time of the day, where it happened, what happened, who they were, all of those things. So if you can remove decisions needing to be made, or how do we do this, or God, give me strength to get through this, because you don't even know what's on the other side of that door.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know what's on the other side of that door. But with that support officer, they do. They have a pretty good idea what's on the other side of that door.
And it can at least prepare you.
Hmm. And hopefully you've had conversations because George and I very openly talked about an OIS, what would happen, not to the degree of if he was killed, because he never thought that would happen to him. But if he was in an OIS, um, they would take his gun, take his badge. They'd have to question him. He wouldn't be able to call me maybe. He didn't know. We talked about those things. And then when you see it on the news, you can't help but think, like, that could be me. What would that be like? What would I do?
Yeah.
And
Okay. I got one more topic for you before
yeah,
we call it a day.
okay.
Talk to me about the foundation.
Oh, I'd love to. So, in the beginning, we talk about all this chaos and all this outpouring of love and support and respect and all the things we talked about. And I couldn't help but think, what about all the guys that are going back to work tomorrow? All this emphasis towards George now, and all, not like, oh, you have to die to get this honor, right? But these guys are struggling. APD is understaffed. It's not a fun time to be a police officer anywhere. And I couldn't believe these guys just had to go back to work. I couldn't even think straight. They have to just go back. And then it made me think of all the trauma they experience. And they just keep going back, and they're expected to do it. And this is what you signed up for. And people say things like that. Well, that's what George signed up for.
Yeah. Fuck that guy.
Right. And this is what they signed up for. Yeah, but is this really in our best interest to send them back out on this, right? And not take care of these people? And so I just had this overwhelming sense that I wanted to take care of them in some way. And then shirts and hats and patches and coins, bracelets, mourning bands, all the things, beautiful. But what would George want? And you know what George would want? You know how he'd want you to honor him? Go to training, go to the range, do good police work, be a great cop, be the guy that you want to back you up.
Yeah.
Be that guy. Just be that guy in honor of me. Please do that. And I thought, well, how do I get that to happen? Because people can spiral quickly, and then there's the talk, and people get salty, and and I didn't want that. I didn't want to lose that momentum. And I think it was also something for me to, regain that agency that we talked about, or feel a little bit in control. And again, fearing that he would be forgotten. Let's do something in his honor, and let's make it about training, and then wellness and community engagement. But really those two things, by saying, because when we did, backing up just a tiny bit, if I can, procession going through downtown Austin, I was terrified. This is the same town, spit on them, threw things at them, that protest against them. I thought, why in the world are we driving through here? They're going to be happy for what has happened. They're going to throw stuff at the Bearcat. I really thought that. I was terrified. And in complete contrast, there was kids out with signs, "We love you, Officer Pastore." There was people saluting. There was flags. They were on the bridges. And I was just blown away. And it gave me like this spark of hope, you know? And even to go down 6th Street, which is where he worked DTAC and patrolled that, and they had the thin blue line, black and white flags up all down 6th Street. Um, I was like, this is beautiful. And so I knew that it's just those little things of just saying, "We appreciate you." And the way I thought I could do that was by doing this foundation, by funding and providing training in George's honor, and giving people an outlet for their grief or their sadness instead of going the dark way. You know what? Hell yeah, I'm gonna sign up for this training
Yep.
and know the whole time it's for the foundation and that was paid for, and George would be so stoked that I'm here. And then guess what? Get a little more comfortable in your skills, regain a little bit of confidence, feel like people care about you, have a better purpose, get that training bug that George would love for you to have, and sign up for another one, and then another one, and then another one. Instead of that, I'm not even gonna take these calls. Nobody in this town cares about us anyway. They don't want us here anyway. No, F that. I'm gonna get better so that I feel confident and kind of, you know, uh, impact that culture internally and keep George's name. It was really just to make sure he was never forgotten and to honor him in the way that I knew that he would want. And quite selfishly, it's given me something to get up and do every day. It's brought me joy. It's kept me so busy,
Good.
which I don't know if it's a good thing, but it's keeping me busy. And I think he'd be really proud of all the work that we're doing.
I know that he would. Where can people find the foundation?
jpastorefoundation.com. We just kind of revamped our site. We have all our training opportunities on there. We do offer training grants for people who apply for them and have to kind of write, what it means to them to get to do these trainings. We're sending a guy out to a blue bearing training and working with some really great trainers out there, working with Staccato, and they've been so generous with their range time so we can do trainings out there and just really branching out. And kind of making it cool to support law enforcement training. I think everybody thinks, well, their department should pay for it. And they do what they can, but
It's not enough.
it's not enough.
Yeah.
And so we're there to be a part of the solution and not just bitch about the problem, right?
So if you're sitting listening to this and thinking, what can I do? You can go to J. Pastore Foundation and donate all the money you can possibly afford.
You can donate all the money you can possibly afford. We literally have very little overhead. All the money goes towards training. And then we're working with some great organizations that offer some wonderful wellness programs, from suicide prevention, PTSD research, retreats for guys. So really very proudly working with some organizations who are doing good work, because that breaks my heart every day, that they are struggling, and we don't want that to happen. So we've got that, and then just trying to get the community, trying to kind of make it cool to support law enforcement again. And so in some of our classes, we allow civilians to take the class with the cops. So they get to kind of train with them. And they're like, this was so cool. And then they pay for the class, and that money comes back to the donation through our instructor who teaches those classes. So a lot of them post like, I just trained with a bunch of cops. That was really cool. And then we had our first annual Humble Warrior Games in November for his end of watch. And we had hundreds of people out there. We did a 5K obstacle course. We had fire, EMS, civilians, and really just trying to just tame that that animosity that's there and try to bridge that gap a little bit. Like, we're all just humans, want the same thing, want to be loved, appreciated, And so it's been great, and I'm so proud of the work we're doing and all the people that are helping, and the volunteers just come from everywhere. It's a beautiful group of people.
Kim, you are a rock star. Thank you so much for taking the time
Thank
to
you,
do this with
John.
me.
Thank you. Hopefully we can help some people, some good information out there. I appreciate you and all you do. Thanks, John.